Welcome, everyone. What a tremendous honor and privilege to welcome you here today to listen to a very prodigious and prolific group. How many of you have traveled for this wonderful moment? I know we have some guests from Philadelphia. Thank you, everyone, for making the time in your day to come and see this. I'm going to try and be brief. But of course, we have to thank our generous funders and supporters that helped to bring this exhibition here. The Alice Kleberg Foundation, Cause Connect, Mother Tongue Magazine, Scott and Judy Nyquist, I saw Judy, Natalia Rockland, and Jordan Seff. Thank you so much for all that you did. I also want to thank the Mothership Dinner coordinators and hosts, Hannah Siegel-Gardner, Winnie Schur, and the entire host committee, and everyone that came that night. It was an incredible evening, a strong group of women and 3 men that came out and supported this incredible project, and it just showed how important it was to have a space and platform to discuss women's issues. I want to just take you back for a moment when this exhibition first opened in Philadelphia in 2021, May 2021, I believe it was. And at that time, you know, there was a pandemic, and it was a very pivotal moment, I would say, in our history. And I got a message one afternoon, a guy inviting me to go out to a museum on a first date, if you will. And I was like, great, my friend Michelle just opened this show at the Mutter Museum. And if you don't know, that's a collection of medical oddities. So, great idea, take someone during a pandemic to a show of medical oddities and discuss motherhood. Great news, that guy's now the first gentleman of the Houston Center for Contemporary Craft. So it's been wonderful to watch the arc of the show, the serpentine table that was then installed at the Center for Architecture, and to bring it here, of course, is a tremendous pleasure and honor and joy for us. So I'm gonna turn it over. I want to congratulate the team here at the Craft Center. The show is extraordinary. Everyone has gotten behind it, the education team, the marketing team, everyone, and congratulations to Sarah on the beautiful installation and the exhibitions team as well. So without further ado, I will turn the mic over so she can introduce this esteemed panel.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight. I am so happy to be here celebrating Designing Motherhood on view in its 5th iteration at Houston Center for Contemporary Craft. My name is Sarah Darrow, and I am the curator and exhibitions director here. And this multivalent curatorial project, which is a book, a design syllabus, an Instagram archive, and of course an exhibition, which please visit after this, really demonstrates the immense power of convening, drawing together constellations of objects, stories, artists, and institutions into dialogue. This relational networked spirit also inflects the show's methodology, and in each city on this tour, community thought partners have been essential to adapting it and citing it to regional perspectives and issues. The flow of today's panel is going to be started with lightning round presentations, first by Juliana Rowan Barton, one of the esteemed curators of Designing Motherhood, and also the gallery director of Gallery 360 at Northeastern University. She's going to kind of create the framework and arc, give us the background of the project, and then we are going to turn it over to 3 exhibiting artists, Jennifer Ling Datchik, Francesca Fuchs, and Allison Corney Moses. After that, Allison will take the mantle and moderate this incredible panel. All 5 curators and members of the Designing Motherhood curatorial team and family are here from London, Philadelphia, Boston. We're so excited to have you all here. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Juliana to begin. And a couple of housekeeping things. We have restrooms in the back. Please silence your phones if you haven't already. And we have the catalog for the show and Mother Tongue Magazine and an amazing photography book by Maggie Shannon available right here to purchase. And maybe we can get some folks John Hancock's afterwards. Okay, thanks, Juliana.
you, I don't need the clicker. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks so much for bringing this exhibition to Houston. It's been such a joy. This is the first time our curatorial team has been all together, I think, in 2 years. So it's really such a pleasure to be celebrating this all together with you. Thank you to all of the artists for contributing your work to the exhibition, and to Allison for moderating, another member of our Designing Motherhood team since back in 2021. You'll see her work in one of the first exhibitions here. So I'm going to give you, I should have set my clock up, but I'm going to give you a really quick rundown of Designing Motherhood. I'm going to focus on the exhibitions a little bit, because that's what you're seeing, to give a little bit of context to the show we have on view here. We'll get into the origin story when we do the panel. I think you'll get to hear firsthand from how the exhibition came to be. So what is Designing Motherhood? Sarah has already said it's a book, which you can purchase here. It's this traveling exhibition. It's public programs like we're doing right now. It's a design curriculum that you can check out on our website. It's an Instagram. It's a personal narrative portraiture project. And it's really a collaboration. So you can see all the members of our team here at openings around the world now, since we have an international exhibition, as well as our newest member, March. There she is, about a couple weeks old, and you see her here too in front of you. I like to frame Designing Motherhood, the whole project. So all of these things come together around a framework of lots of different terms and kind of ideologies, but 3 of them really stick out to me. This is from our glossary from the Stockholm exhibition. And the 3 terms that come to mind for me are our definition of motherhood, our definition of reproductive justice, and of culturally appropriate care. So I'm going to bring those out to you. They are also, maybe they're in the book, they're in a glossary in a couple of places. So our description of motherhood is maybe not the one that first comes to mind, but it's really integral to all elements of our project. Motherhood is a shorthand for acts that go beyond the gender binary and beyond people who have been pregnant or given birth. It is a descriptor that can be embodied, deferred, refused, taken on as a duty or expectation, or otherwise engaged with in all its naughty contours. Motherhood is a myriad. So that's how we really ground the project, even in this title, Designing Motherhood. It is not just about having children, it is about caregiving and service, and the ways in which we can build a society that and design really a society that attends to all of those things in its naughtiness. Care being a really important part of it also comes in this definition. We learned about the concept of culturally appropriate care from our colleagues at the Maternity Care Coalition, who were our initial thought partners for the exhibition. Culturally appropriate care is deeply felt. It is the experience that often goes unarticulated, except when the care that is offered misses the mark. We first came to know this care as rituals and remedies passed down through generations, and our understanding of care evolves across lifetimes as we give and receive care in a range of human encounters. Within health-seeking contexts, each person deserves a kind of care that is centered on them, their needs, their innate knowledge of themselves, and the set of practices that reflect care within culture and communities that support and sustain them. And we also really ground ourselves in reproductive justice. I show this part of the book as it's an interview with Loretta Ross, a pioneer of the reproductive justice movement, who was interviewed. It's firsthand knowledge that really grounds the way we interact with our project, which is why I'm so excited to have some of the artists here to tell their own stories. Reproductive justice is the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and parent the children you have with dignity in safe and sustainable communities. Its definition was pioneered by a group of women of African descent for reproductive justice in 1994, building on the knowledge of Indigenous women, women of color, and trans people. So it's also important to ground the different communities that give us these definitions and help support the work that we do. So Layla mentioned the exhibition. We've all started working together over the past 6+ years in different iterations. Our first exhibition opened in Philadelphia at the Mutter Museum, exploring collaborations or juxtapositions of historical objects from the Mutter Museum collection alongside contemporary ones. So here you have historical nipple shields alongside Maria Ife's jewelry created nipple shields which are in the exhibition here, alongside historical pessaries from the Mutter's collection and ones that are currently under review from the FDA, so new prototypes. So a lot of that balance was happening in this little gem of an exhibition. It was like a 500 square foot space. We then moved and had a sister exhibition at the Center for Architecture in Philadelphia. You can't see Allison's incredible work. You can see Allison's incredible work in the exhibition, but we commissioned artists to work with us, including Allison, to create pieces that you're now seeing here. It's where we first developed our serpentine deck, our umbilical cord that has really carried us through in many different places. And we were thinking a little bit more about contemporary objects. So contemporary and very loose, like 20th century terms. We have strollers, we have buildings, so we think a little bit more expansively in this space. We brought the two shows together in Boston at the museum, Mass Art Museum, and we had thought partners at Neighborhood Birth Center who are creating an incredible birth center in Boston and Cambridge, one of the first. They're incredible policy advocates in our community as well. So this was the first time the exhibitions came together, and we were really thinking about contemporary art and the ways in which these conversations take place in design, expansively, but also in artistic practice a little bit more than we had previously. I love the MAM show, so I have lots of photos of it here. And then we went to Seattle in 2023, where we were at the Gates Discovery Center. We had an incredible group of community partners, including our friend Angela Garbus, who's here with us today, who informed the project for the West Coast. The Gates Center, we were thinking about low resource communities and low resource countries, so global health a little bit more than we had before. So each site has kind of put its imprint, inflected, on the project. Here we also had some really interesting interactives. So thinking about parental leave around the world and how much leave folks in the United States got to other places. And then we just also opened the exhibition in Stockholm. So it traveled internationally, it's on view in Sweden. A third of the objects came from Europe, so we were really rethinking what the exhibition could be like in a new context, as we have continued to do. We commissioned this incredible installation by Samira Bubana, Inside Out. Her mother was a midwife in Europe and in Africa, and the installation is based on her mother's archive and journals. And I'm just gonna flip through some photos to see. The installation's really different, but also wonderful curtain use in both places. So a lot of the same conversations of the show coming together in new spaces. We had wonderful partners there as well. And I don't want to take up too much time because I think I already flew through all of that. So thank you so much, and I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer.
Hello, as a cat, a Chinese American Texan, and who has recently left the state, I'm really excited to be back, and most especially to be back at a place where I've shown in 2021. My exhibition, Later, Longer, Fewer, also included the Chinese carry-out family planning for the revolution propaganda poster, which I first discovered at the Shanghai Propaganda Poster Art Museum in the basement of an apartment complex, the least archival, the least climate-controlled museum I've ever been to, where you could buy every reproduction of it except for the ones about women's issues. But later in that, they really pushed for women to have children later in life, longer intervals between children, and fewer. But in many ways still just kept perpetuating the one-child policy, which placed the value of girls over boys. And I think a lot about the social, cultural, and political systems that continue to hold women back. And much of the work in this exhibition really focused on how women's bodies literally embody time. In the start of the pandemic in 2020, I decided to do 5 rounds of IVF, 2 rounds of donor eggs, 3 miscarriages, 3 abortions in 3 different Texas abortion ban times. And so I was really focused on that 2 weeks of stimulated ovulation to implantation in hopes that it landed on a positive pregnancy test, which 2 weeks was also the initial COVID quarantine time. And so I lived within these 2-week cycles all the time. I also, growing up in a culturally Chinese household, was surrounded by objects So like these candlesticks, which had babies crawling on them, which was about fertility. And so I really, in my work, I love domestic objects. I focus on the objects that provide us hope, luck, prosperity, and I'm also very superstitious. And so I surround myself with these things. And that after going all of this, I think to live with the shame and failures of my body, I had to find ways to like confront this, and like I am proud to say that I am one tough bitch, and that I live and surrounded by so many one tough bitches. But as an object maker who loves the material of porcelain, I love that it symbolizes fragility but also resilience. And that just like a broken piece of ceramics, please don't throw it away or discard it, that there's so much beauty in the broken. And I think we are all made up of many broken things. And so in my house, we always had a Buddha placed behind the glass of a perfect china cabinet. My parents had one that was given to them on their new marriage, and that to later look at them and realize it was all little boys climbing across the Buddha. And then I had the fortunate opportunity to work with the Buddha factory in Jindajin, China, the birthplace of porcelain, where I absolutely love this Buddha and how the teeth, the tongue, the nipples are so beautifully articulated. And I asked permission to work with it. And I asked the male factory owner, but really he went and whispered to his wife, and it was really her decision, and I love that. But I sculpted little girl hairstyles on the babies crawling on him. And I really think about that Chinese expression about how girls hold up half the sky, and I wanted that reflected in the objects in my household. And that part of my work too, I'm really interested in like Chinese export wear and the objects that are marketed to us or that we place in our homes without a larger context or meaning. My Neck, My Back Babies, if you know the song reference, I'm so happy for you. I also sang that song way too much at way too young and did not know what the lyrics meant. But these are pillow forms, which are for at a time where women had to rest uncomfortably, a form of labor to not sleep and get a comfortable night's rest to protect their hairstyles. So as they navigated the circles they lived with, they had to present themselves a certain way. I see the cuteness of these babies as a way to carry labor. And as someone who comes from a long line of service industry Asians, how so much of my family went to care for others so that I can succeed. They gutted people's fish, sewed their clothes, washed their clothes, and watched and raised other people's children. I think about the care they've put into communities that don't recognize their names or their faces. And so I think we're all hustlers in our own way. I so appreciate and being part of this exhibition and this community, and that, I think, thank you.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here to speak after you, Jennifer. I love your pieces always. I'm just so grateful to meet this amazing panel of women here. And Sarah, thank you for including me in this iteration. It's an honor to be part of the show. I'm gonna put this here and I'm not gonna look at it, but I'm just gonna have it. I have two paintings in the show, Baby 1 and Baby 2, and I thought what I would talk about is a little bit of the history of these paintings because they are 20 years old, which you may not know. They were made in 2005 and 2004. And so I apologize for the bad image quality. These are slides scanned to digital from 2005. The show was at Texas Gallery here in Houston. The show title was Mom, and the paintings were each called Baby. The paintings were as large as I could make them in my studio at the time. I had 8-foot-high ceilings and I work unstretched, and so the 7'2" was really as big as I could get it. I wanted the paintings to feel monumental, and the gallery, you were surrounded by 6 of these giant paintings, so that you really kind of felt immersed maybe in a space of just being with these babies. And I wish I had a better image to stop on as I'm still talking. They also, I'm going to go back to the front, they also very much came out of thinking about color field paintings, abstraction, how can I make a landscape of some kind, but also have it be deeply personal, deeply intimate, and deeply feminist at the same time. So that was this show. And I think about them in terms of the German word Leinwand. I'm half German, and a Leinwand is a screen. It's also a canvas, and I wanted them to feel like they were kind of screens and as monumental as possible. So I was super excited when Fran Colpitt, badass curator and art historian, invited me to be part of a show at UTSA in San Antonio. And I had the opportunity to paint baby one at a scale of 14 to 18 feet. So this was painted on the wall. I came out of a tradition of wall painting. Moving to canvas was really necessitated by having children, because I no longer could go and spend 3 weeks installing at a show somewhere. So just so that you again get the sense of scale, and I had some wonderful helpers, which made it easier in San Antonio. Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to point you to is an article that I wrote 10 years later, so in 2015, for Glass Tire. It's on, you can read it on Glass Tire still or on my website. It was called Artist and Mom. From 2015, so I might write it differently if I wrote it now, but I still hold to it. It was really lonely being a mom when I had children in 2001 and 2003. I knew no other artists who had children. There was no community of mothers who were artists, and it was extremely hard to navigate how to be a badass artist and at the same time a badass mom, right? Like, how can I hold these two spaces that are both about extreme time commitment, love, and care? And so this was sort of my advice, my sharing and advice of, how might this look like? And you were talking to a woman who never thought she was going to have children. I also wanted to point you to the Museum of Fine Arts Houston that has Baby 6 up on view at the moment, which they purchased out of the show Mom. It's in the Kinder building on the 3rd floor in the Love Languages room, which I of course love, and Alison de Lima Green is here, so huge shout out to you, Alison, thank you. And that's where I want to end, so thank you very much.
Hi everybody, I hope you can hear me. All right, so I'm going to talk quickly. Because I got 4 minutes. Will you give me a little 4-minute check? My images are blurry. You're going to have to imagine clarity. These are images of my studio. I'm in Boston, Massachusetts, specifically in Allston. At the time, I was working on the My Babies piece that's on show here. So you get to see it in the context of my working space. It now looks very different, crammed with things. I have grown out of my studio, which is good and bad. I always try to root myself, especially in a community like this, with where I came from. My parents are Guyanese American immigrants. They came over, 50 years ago probably. And making and craft was part of our life since I can remember. So the clothes that we're wearing over here, my sister and I, this is me. You can see where Audrey gets it from. Those clothes my mom made. We gardened and made our food. Not all of it, of course, but it was a part of pretty much everyday activities. It's where my drawing took off and was supported. I made hair bows and sold them to teachers at school. It's just kind of wild thinking back about that. But that's where craft and making became essential in my life, and really, I would say, is a guiding light to my process. This is my son who's not here. I made this piece, this vessel in college, and Michelle Miller-Fisher came over when my daughter was maybe 9 months old and took a photo of this piece, and now it's in the collection at the MFA in Boston. And Ezra had a kick out of being inside that vessel. And then I also made sure that their school has woodworking, because I think it's essential for education to work with your hands. This is just some images of the true artist in our family, who is coming in and out of here, but this is her in her spaces over the years. So I wanted to talk a little bit about process. I actually don't remember what the prompt was, but I'm gonna talk about process and then talk about some images and things I'm working on, and I am gonna start talking fast. So I make these pod series, which is how the pieces in the show are made. So I glue up a post of, this is all cedar. So cedar posts come together, you cut them like a pie, and you take those pie pieces and cut the shape that you want out, and then they get glued back together and shaped kind of like nesting vessels. Or nesting dolls. So if you want more clarity on that, I can talk more in detail. And then I shape them smooth, and I love the grain pattern and the joints that you see. And you can make them very crisp, which in these pods, they're very crisp lines. In the ones there, it's very not crisp, thinking about the stretching of our bodies as we grow humans. I took out all my Designing Motherhood images because the show is up there, so you can look at that. But I will say the Designing Motherhood, the commission, when I got the commission for it, it was a prompt to, it was a time where I had a full-time job, pandemic was hitting, I was, maybe this was before, I don't remember what the pandemic was, but I remember it was like this spark to investigate myself as I've navigated motherhood, but also kind of connecting back to myself and my body. And in a time where my art practice was expanding, like I was trying to expand it, and this was the content, right? So that show, I thought about, or that work, I thought about my interpretation of motherhood as a 3-part series, and I didn't have time to finish the third, or money to finish the third part. So I got funding elsewhere and committed to making the work. I didn't quite, fund it all, but the piece, this piece, is called On My Own, which is the idea of being on your own when your kids are kind of away from your body and you're starting to kind of redefine who you are. That piece was acquired by the Fuller Craft Museum this past year. And I used the funding that I got to plan an exhibition called Unadulterated Black Joy with 4 other Black mother artists. We focused on joy. For Designing Motherhood, I did a piece, and I don't think the video is here, but there's a piece that was around gatherings of Black mothers during this time, processing our experiences during the pandemic, which is a different experience than other folks in our country, in our world. And so I was really thinking about what are Black women and Black mothers going through. And so we had Zoom meetings and an in-person gathering. And this one here, we did hula hooping, roller skating, we did the silks, like the hanging from the ceiling thing. I couldn't do it, but other people did it. And we recorded that, and then we had an exhibition. And these are the artists that I worked with. They're all Boston-based. So Lamerchi Frazier, Aqua Holmes, Zahara Nur Truth, and Tanya Nixon Silberg. They all think about joy, connecting back to Black girlhood joy, to redefine who we are or connect back, reimagine this new person that exists. And these women are amazing. If you don't know them, you should follow them, figure it out. For that show, I focused on my physical body, just like in this show. I needed to go through a surgery to correct my diastasis recti and my abdominal or umbilical hernia to be able to move my body. And I still, today, I was like running around the Children's Museum, and I still, after the surgery, feel this pulling. And so I did series around the surgery that I had done. And then this piece is called The Joy of Repair. I know I'm over my time, but here we are. So this is where I started thinking about wood as the body and peeling away the skin and investigating kind of skin, insides, outsides, bodies, and then started to think about relationships. So that's just the clear images of On My Own, which I love. I shaped through the layers of veneer for that one. Anyway, process shot. I did an exhibition in Boston, a solo show in 2023, where this was my first real step into being a full-time, really getting to be that full-time artist that I want. And then I just wanted to end on 3 images of new work, because I think it's all a continuum, and I hardly can think about the current moment. I'm always thinking about the future, which is sometimes a problem. But I think about, like, where's my work going? Where's Designing Motherhood going? What is next? What's a new iteration? What do we want to say or do after this moment? So for my artwork, this show opened, I think, yesterday. I was here, not there, in LA. And these are close to 4 feet, probably 3.5 feet by 3.5 feet, wood panels, and thinking not just about the body, but about relationships. So this is, I don't know the title, I just made up the titles last night. But it's like thinking about the family unit. So they have parent panels and kid panels on the inside. There's 4 of them. We have a family of 4. These are suspended works. I think they're called something like We Shimmer. And it's thinking about Black women and shimmering, and like nails and hair and smiles and lipstick, and I don't do half of it, but I'm like, I shimmer too. So there's 4 pieces, and they have mica in the finish of them, and embedded in the wood fibers. And then these last pieces, I worked with a lumber source that kind of saves trees from the chipper. Trees that get cut down when you're building, and they're not perfect trees. They have like knottiness in them, which connects to us and our bodies and all the things. And so I did these collaborations where I'm carving and painting, responding to the grain direction of the pieces, and then that was it. And I know I'm definitely. We're gonna start this off real easy. So this is the type of conversation we're gonna have. We're gonna have family members that want to be close but don't want to be looked at or talked to. So I want, instead of me introducing all of you, I want you all to introduce, I'm taking a page from your book. Introduce yourselves quickly. Tell us what brought you to Designing Motherhood. It's kind of like the origin story, but how you got to the program. Yeah, right? Yeah. I can start. Yeah, can you start?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Hello, it's so nice to be with everybody, and thank you for all of the amazing conversations and introductions that have gone before. My name's Michelle Miller-Fisher. I'm originally from Scotland, but I've been in the States now for 20 years, and I work and live on the Northeast Coast. I'm a curator, and what brought me to Designing Motherhood, it was almost exactly a decade ago. I started out as a junior curator, a curatorial assistant at MoMA, and I came into that office, and no one talked about their children, and I knew I wanted to have children. I was 31 years old. And I looked around and I thought, I'm doing contemporary design and we're talking about how design can save the world. Surely there's a type of design system that means I could have a kid and also be a successful curator. There must be a balance there. And I didn't see that model. I talked to women especially who were a generation or two generations older than me. And they were really helpful, and they admitted sometimes that they had sought that model out and not being able to find it. And I thought, well, maybe there's a way that it could be a bit different. So my story is interconnected with all of these other amazing folks on the stage tonight, but I think my first sort of epiphany moment was trying to get a breast pump acquired into the design collection at MoMA and being told no. And that no then turned into the many yeses of another, and also many no's, as you'll hear, of Designing Motherhood. But I'll pass it on to Amber.
Yeah, that story never gets old. I'm Amber Winnick. So I had the fortunate circumstance to grow up around a lot of birth. My mom was one of those 1970s women who was working really hard at restoring midwives' rights, and she was a lawyer. And she drafted the legislation for Florida, which is where I grew up, to restore licensure rights to midwives because they had, for many years, been made illegal. And I think that was kind of like a setting place for me to kind of work from. Fast forward to I did a master's program in design history in the 2010s, and I wrote a class paper on 20th century maternity fashion, and I wanted to get into the ideas that my mom was into as well. So connecting that to kind of the way we give birth, connecting these objects to things like midwifery were all really important to me. And then I met the lovely Michelle, and here we were, two design historians who had a lot in common because we were thinking about these issues, and it was sort of off to the races from there. And then we got interconnected with all of these other wonderful people, but I'll let you tell your story.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Gabriella Nelson. I'm from New Jersey. That is where, I got to rep it. I got to. I have to. I'm actually a trained city planner. And when I was in grad school, I was pregnant and I experienced a miscarriage. And just that entire situation kind of, I didn't know how to deal with it. And I'm in grad school, so the natural thing to do was research. I don't know, instead of like cussing somebody out, I started to learn more about Black reproductive history. That's where I learned about reproductive justice, and I started understanding that there is an entire movement of Black women that was created by Black women for me to find comfort and some solidarity in. And I started to really make the connections between city planning policies and practices and how they can impact our bodies biologically, especially birthing people. And so I did an independent study on city planning's impacts on birthing people, and I ended up doing a TEDx talk, and that kind of became my calling card because I thought I was going to be doing affordable housing, making the affordable developer coin. But my experiences pushed me into this reproductive health, reproductive rights, reproductive justice world, and that TEDx talk became my calling card. And so shortly after grad school, I worked for the Housing Authority for a little bit, and I tried to bring in that reproductive justice programming and ideology to the Housing Authority in Philadelphia. That didn't really work, even though much of the audience and the people that we cater to in housing authorities are single mothers, but there wasn't a lot of support for that. And I ended up working for Maternity Care Coalition shortly after, where I first met Zoe, and later, like literally maybe like a week or so later into my time at Maternity Care Coalition, I met the rest of the Designing Motherhood team because I had just given birth. I think my son was almost 1 at that time. And it was just a weird time. Like, it was August 2020, I think. Hey, boo-boo. Oh, that's our baby. That's our baby. Yes. That's my twin, can't you? I really want her to look like me. Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you. And so it was a crazy time. We're in the house. I'm a newish parent. And all the pictures that I took with my son, I was so crusty, y'all. Like, we were in the house. I wasn't going anywhere. My hair wasn't done. Like, I was just feeling, ugh. And I woke up one day, and my mom was there, and I was like, I'm going to moisturize my body. I'm going to do my hair. I'm going to moisturize my son's body, and we're going to take a picture and not just be crusty, dusty, pandemic style chic. And I had my mom just take a picture of me breastfeeding my son because that's all he did. It wasn't even on purpose. And I posted the picture on Instagram, and I think Michelle saw the picture on Instagram and asked if I wanted to be a part of the book, and I was like, hell yeah. And then we learned about our design histories and journeys, and it just became a natural fit. And that's how I became a part of this team, and I couldn't have planned it, and I'm just super grateful. I call Designing Motherhood the gift that keeps on giving, because I had no clue what I signed up for at all, and I'm just so happy to still be here and doing the work together.
Hi everybody, my name is Zoe. I am a non-binary, lesbian visual artist, cultural producer, and my 9 to 5, I'm a development manager at Black Star Projects. The caffeine has completely drained from my body like 30 minutes before we started this panel, so bear with me. I was working at Maternity Care Coalition at the time as a executive assistant for a CEO, and I had the lovely opportunity of meeting Michelle, Amber, and Juliana really at the beginning of their beautiful project. And I kind of wiggled my way onto the team and was able to serve as a curatorial assistant. Thank you. But as Gabriella said, I'm so grateful to be here. I'm also child-free, so it's been really wonderful to really absorb the stories that folks have shared with us and been vulnerable. It's a gift that truly does keep on giving.
Okay. You've already met me. I'm Juliana Rowan Barton. I'm an architecture and design historian by training. I met Michelle Fisher in Philly a long time ago now, and we were working together at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. I was working on a dissertation that explored some questions around domesticity and the confluence of race, gender, and design. And so as we worked together on an exhibition, a contemporary design exhibition in Philadelphia, she kind of tapped me on the shoulder and was like, I'm doing this other thing, do you want to come do image rights for it? That was a way in, helping to source images for the book. And I always joke you all couldn't get rid of me after I just started doing that. So I've been working with the team since 2020, and it's been really wonderful to kind of have a project we run independently. It is the gift that keeps on giving, but it's an incredible gift of autonomy as well, and the way like we have taken charge of how we want this project to be and where it goes and shape it and what it is, and that feels really meaningful in a world where we don't have a lot of control over a lot of other things, and so it feels like a blessing to be here again all together, and yeah, I just feel grateful to explore the ideas in the exhibition with a wonderful group of people and thinkers and artists, and including Allison.
I'm going to turn it back to you in a second. So, thank you for sharing kind of your story to get here. I think it's important in my work. I'm always thinking about this stuff doesn't just happen. People make it happen. As individuals, all of you in the room, you're making something happen, whether it's choosing to do something or not do something. And I think it's important to kind of take the kind of layers away so that we see how we get to this place and the impact that it's having. So we're going to spend a little bit of time kind of discussing the show and impact and all of our thoughts, and hopefully you have time for some Q&A. So I just saw the show here, and I am curious Juliana's thoughts, because I heard from last night that you were really shocked is not the right word, but impressed by the exhibition here and the way that it's been curated, specifically this iteration, and it's been shown quite a few pieces at this point. So I'm just curious of like, what are your thoughts about the exhibition and the curation that Sarah did so well, and why is it why is it hitting you different here?
I think the word I used was verklempt. Yeah. I was overcome when I walked in. I think what has been so wonderful about the exhibition as it's traveled, and you've seen all the different some photos of the different iterations, we've all had hands in it to various extent, and this is the first exhibition that we've kind of passed our baby off a little bit and let someone else be the teacher, or whatever kind of metaphor you want to use. And so we've seen the checklist, we knew what was going to be on it, but it's really different to see, photos online in little thumbnails to seeing them in person. And really, I felt the way that Sarah and the folks here at HCC understood the project, understood the kind of grounding that we had laid out. I talked about culturally appropriate care, reproductive justice, like those, I feel them in the exhibition in a really wonderful way. And I do think craft has a big part in that. I have been really, there are so many, as design historians, we don't really follow traditional art museum guidelines as to like what to put on display. You'll see like pieces of paper in the exhibition that some of the kind of older curators I've worked for would like shudder at the idea of a printed piece of paper on a deck in a museum. That doesn't mean anything, but it is meaningful. That's the Edinburgh postpartum depression checklist. Like that's an incredible design object. And I think there are so many histories that are really hard to materialize in design and in art, and there's something that craft has really materialized some of them. I think about, Jennifer, your work. We have worked really hard to find ways to express loss in the exhibition, and have they've been obstacles we haven't solved, for lack of a better word, and it's so wonderful to see your pieces here. I think about the TikTok of the clay showing the dilation. Like, we can show a dilation chart. It's really incredible to see it in clay. This malleable material has all these, metaphors and analogies with the body. You talk about wood in your body. Like, there's just a way that craft has allowed us to materialize and physicalize and visualize conversations that we're having that are at the root of the exhibition. And it's really wonderful to see all of that combined with the pieces of paper and the chairs or the strollers or the like formal design objects.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of lens to highlight, because in my piece, we talk a lot about design and we talk about the object. But here, I can get into the weeds. And you have one time afterwards to get in the weeds about the making of the pieces, my bellies and my babies, that wasn't intentional about like thinking about the stretching of bodies, thinking about the pulling apart of bodies, and how do I capture that? Which I don't think I did like perfectly, right? But I think it was the craft in my mind is like the intentionality of how we make things, and the intentionality of how we make things to be viewed and experienced, and the making of it. So the feeling of the objects as you make it in connection to pregnancy. Like I remember holding a belly that was no longer there and remembering the spots on my body that I tried to capture in the pieces that are there. So I think it's a really kind of good point to bring up. I'm gonna turn it to Gabriella. Yeah. So you've now seen Designing Motherhood in these different iterations as well. And I want to think about the hope of the project. So for this project, and generally for exhibitions like these that are directly addressing important issues that impact all races and economic positions, and this is based on a conversation we had the other night. So just thinking about this project, again, I don't sit in the now very long. I'm always thinking about the future. Yeah.
This project is so coveted, I think, to all of us, but I'll just speak for myself. There's almost a fear of like what's gonna happen when it ends, right? Because things don't last forever. We've built such a beautiful ecosystem of like collaboration and family and all of the things, I want Designing Motherhood to last forever. So that is like my initial hope, but then I have to bring my Piscean self back down to this reality and realize that there are life cycles for everything. I think what I hope for the future of this project is to see it continue to just transform. We've seen the different iterations, and they have all been so different and so beautiful and so moving, and there are so many adjectives to connect to each of the exhibitions. Like, I'm so grateful to be a part of this team. I've been introduced to a world that I didn't necessarily think it wasn't for me. I just wasn't thinking about the art world. I'm a city planner. Like, that's what I was thinking about. And this project has opened my eyes completely to what curation looks like, to what design means, to what art means, capital letter A and lowercase a. But also, look around the room. There's people missing here. And what I hope for Designing Motherhood is it to continue to transform and mutate so that more people can be brought into this space. The people that I converse with and hang out with, the people that are the godparents to my kids. Kids? I only have one, y'all. Please. Yeah, who knows? So that is what I hope, and I hope through the autonomy that we built with this project that we can revolutionize and rebel and talk shit and like make people mad. Because the institutions, and we talked about this at length, the institutions are not going to be the revolutionary ones. It's going to have to be us. And it's not going to always be easy or fun or pretty, but if I'm going to be a part of it, which I hope to be a part of it for as long as it lives, I have to know that the people that I commune with on a daily are also a part of it and feel welcomed in these spaces. And I'm not sure if we're there yet.
I just want to add something to what Gabriella says, because I feel like I remember like early press rounds for Designing Motherhood, and one of the questions we got asked was about hope and like what do you want for the progress, or what would progress be for Designing Motherhood and for these topics. And that was 2021. That was pre the fall of Roe. There are like a lot of things in our world that have changed since then, and my answer is still the same, which is I don't want us to be the only ones talking about this, and we're not. And I want other people to have the same autonomy that we have to develop projects that feel right to them. Designing Motherhood is for everyone, absolutely. There are also other ideas that go beyond us. Like I want 1 million Designing Motherhoods. That's what I want, and we do not have the bandwidth to do 1 million Designing Motherhoods. It can go on for a long time, but like I really want more of this. That's what progress looks like to me for these topics and ideas, and that can be all of us individually, that can be all the people here, but these are not conversations. I mean, we got asked in 2022 or whatever, like, oh, this project is so timely, and it's like, it's not timely, it's like universal, it is ahistorical. Like, actually, I love Jennifer's dress. It's like, it is ahistorical, these questions, and so hopefully that's what progress, and that's what I hope for this project. Not to take away, I like second everything you said, and I just don't want, we shouldn't be the only ones sitting up here.
Yeah, and I keep questioning or asking myself, how do we bridge the gap is not the word. It's like everyone has something to say, everyone has important things to say, and I want them to be said and listened to, and find spaces where they can be said and listened to. And so those spaces are not always museums or craft centers, you know. Those spaces can be living rooms, they can be libraries, but they need to be happening and supported and not hushed. Yeah. So like I think there's some kind of
So one of the things we were talking this morning, yeah, and also one of the thing that you said today that really got me was like, you know, we all have families and we love our families. This is a family. I love y'all a lot. But I also want to create my own family, right? That doesn't mean that this family no longer exists. And it doesn't mean that this family wouldn't be an extension in my own family or your own family or whatever the word is that we're using, family projects. Oh my gosh, this is my gratitude alarm. I'm so sorry. every day, yes, every day I gotta remind myself to be grateful. But like, my bad. But I think like seeing designing motherhood is this family, and then Gabby might create her own Designing Motherhood family that is still very much a part of this family, but also is something else. But it doesn't take away from anything. It grows.
That's absolutely, when you were saying, Alison, that lovely question about like what does it mean to see Sarah's amazing work here, and you gave a brilliant answer, Juliana, the only thing I would add is that's the whole point of this project, that it always was meant to be something that at the best of it, open source, like the best possible iteration would be to make us obsolete. Or not obsolete necessarily, but like
we're elder.
Yeah, exactly what Angela said on Thursday. You said it really eloquently, Angela, but like the notion of, we could take a step back. Like people can know when to take a step back and to cede space, or to take a step forward. Like to be like, okay, yeah, I see what you did, and here's how I would add to it or do it differently, or et cetera, et cetera. And so we were chatting today and saying, Gabrielle, I'm just going to manifest Gabriella's idea. I'm not taking credit for it. I'm just putting it out there because this is how ideas then become real. What if it went to Mexico City? What if it was connected to communities that I know every single day that I want to be able to bring into these conversations? What if it didn't happen in a museum? What if it happens somewhere else? And those, I think, are really great questions to ask, and they can be answered. And you answer them, and we support you doing that, and Zoe doing that, and whomever else wants to do that. So yeah, this research obviously stands on the shoulders of many other people that have come before it. We are not the first people to have these conversations, nor should we ever be the last. So that's the nicest thing about coming into a space like Sarah's, because you made this, we didn't, and it's really wonderful to see how other people take it on.
I'm gonna keep us in this what if future place. And I'm gonna ask you, Amber. So the impact. So we've been talking about what would we change, how would we envision it, blah, 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 all these different things that could happen. But also what is the impact of this exhibition and the book that you see is happening now and in the context of all the other things in our world?
Objects are just such a great way in, aren't they? They're just great conversation starters and wonderful ways to kind of invite people in and get people to see themselves reflected in places that they may never have felt like they had a place to be. I think in our own scrappy little way, we've really wanted to invert a lot of these hierarchies. And like you said, Michelle, we're just a blip in a longer history of trying to invert some of these traditional power structures. In the field of design history, we had mentors that empowered us to look at everyday objects. Michelle, Juliana, and I all had shared mentors in the wonderful Juliet Kinchin and Paul Sturton, who were giving us permission to look beyond luxury objects, look beyond just objects made by men, and make space for things that our bodies interact with that women might have made. So not only Fabergé eggs belonging in gallery spaces, but why not a menstrual cup, right? So that's a really important hierarchical inversion. I think we also wanted to challenge the idea that obstetrics should be seen as above midwifery, that white babies and white mothers should matter more than black babies and black mothers, that an industrially produced object should be more valuable than one that's made by hand. We've played our bit part in poking some of those tigers. We come from very, very different places. Our social locations are different. We're temperamentally quite different. But I think what we have in common is that we'll want to hand the mic over, and show objects, show people's stories in their objects, show them that they belong in these spaces, that their stories and their reproductive histories matter. Yeah.
Can I add a tiny bit in terms of impact? I'm again, Angela, I'm going to invoke you, sorry, but Angela invoked the recent assassination of the United Healthcare Chief. And I feel like right now, in terms of impact of an exhibition like this, the more I work in museums and centers of the art world, and even the craft and design, which I think is a very special part of that, the more I'm convinced that it has very little impact, or it has less impact than I thought it did when I started out 20 years ago. I feel like these are still really insular spaces. I'm now a white and very middle-class woman, but I came from a very working-class place, and my mum didn't take us to these places growing up, and it wasn't somewhere that I think she would have felt very comfortable coming into. She could not read an exhibition coming through like that, even though she'd be very proud of me taking part in something. And so when I think about the impact of what exhibitions and history making and book making can do, I do think it does something, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it, and I think none of us would be. We feel it has some impact. But I think we're at an inflection point now where, I mean, that was an incredibly, it was interesting, as Angela said, that when somebody was murdered in cold blood on the street, many people's reaction was, let me tell you the time when my healthcare was terminated, when I couldn't get what I needed, when I was cut off from something that was life or death, not just for me, but for a family member, for a loved one. And so when I think about the conversations that are happening, the impact, I guess, of at least showing history is that this is cyclical and it's something to be resisted all of the time. And if even a small part of this history can resonate with somebody, if somebody else's activism can remind somebody that they too can be active, that they too can have a voice, I think that's really important. And I know that growing up, it was actually through reading sports magazines that I learned about the Black Panthers, for example, a whole other American history that had never touched me in my Scottish Borders home. And I think that, so history can do things. These places can do things. And I think if there's an impact at all, it's maybe offering history as a mode of action and as a reminder that nothing happens in a vacuum and everything happens again and again and again. And that people have shown us how to resist before, and we should learn from them and not reinvent the wheel necessarily, but join forces.
I was just going to add to what Amber and Michelle have said. And maybe this is a hope for the impact of the project and not an actual impact, but I think I was once giving a talk in a class and asked to kind of say what like our intervention is in a very like academic, scholarly, like what is your intervention in this? And I kind of balk at that because it's like, no, we work very hard to not center ourselves. We're the ones up here on this panel right now, but normally, like, if I give a talk, you're not really gonna hear me talking about me, you're gonna hear me talking about the incredible artists or the stories behind objects or the birth workers and maternal health care workers and the thought partners that we've had throughout the project. And so my hope is that there's a consciousness raising impact that can be through museums, but like, beyond a lot of this, like we are and can offer a platform, I hope, that like a museum and a public space can offer, but so can an Instagram, and so can a person entering a classroom, and so can Gabby talking to her friends or family members, that there is like consciousness raising for this. And that is something that the art world doesn't necessarily think of itself as, but it can be, that all of, history can be consciousness raising, art objects can be consciousness raising towards whatever the kind of naughty issue. I think there's also like a shedding light on I hate the idea of the darkness, but we talk about the naughty topics. There's a line in the introduction of the book, it's like, these were taboo. It's not taboo to talk about your menstrual cup anymore, or I hope not, that that in a lot of spaces it isn't. And so hopefully some kind of just raising awareness that these things are happening, which feels like a really low bar, but I don't know.
It's the first time I've ever left a panel to change a poop diaper. And like now that we can do that in the middle of this, I would not have felt comfortable doing that. I didn't have a child to do it before, but I feel like there are subtle pushings at some of the institutional boundaries and taboos that we have experienced, at least as curators.
And increasingly so. I mean, we've seen it even in the course of the last few years.
And yet, like, we don't have proper paid leave for everybody in this country. There are a lot of systems, so like, there's a lot of real shit that has to still change massively. And so every time we talk about the impact, you also think about the local, the state, and then the federal system in the United States, which is a shit show. And so.
Yeah, the consciousness, even just to talk about this panel, there's baby sounds throughout, which used to, like, you could see it ripple through the audience of like, what is that noise? It's like, it's humans growing, living, which you once were, right? So just, I appreciate that. So Zoe, I'm gonna turn to you. I'm gonna bring it down to like, kind of like maybe, it's not practical, but more of like the day-to-day, the us the now, the us, not the wish. And so you said that you were the curatorial assistant back then. You got kind of pulled into it. Were you pulled in, or were you? Did you step in?
Clung to.
We clung to. We called Zoe the glue.
Yeah.
So this was my question, because I think I've been thinking about this, and I think all projects we work on, we are proud of doing things. The people or the project, like, it has its own kind of identity and evolution, but we also gift a specific thing to a project. And y'all don't center yourselves, but let me tell you, like, I think it's important to also recognize all of you and center you for a minute, because this is a powerful project. And it's like hard to define designing motherhood in the terms in which we are familiar with. When I try to describe this project to people, I'm like, well, it's a book.
Like 5 minutes.
Well, it's an exhibition. Well, it's conversations. Well, there were interviews. Well, there was photos. There was artwork. And so, we don't really have, I think, the framework to talk about this collaborative work. And I think it is important to recognize what you all have gifted to the project. So I'm gonna ask you for kind of a personal thing of taking a moment to think about what you gifted to the project, and to hold space for that and recognize that.
I hate talking about myself.
Oh, I know.
Sorry. No, it's okay. It's actually been pointed out to me by multiple strangers. My tactic is usually to focus on the other person as much as possible and say as little about myself as I can. I find it deeply uncomfortable to be perceived. But here we are.
Here you are.
Here we are. I would say, I think what I brought to the project is, I forgot about being nicknamed the glue, which I really loved. I think I kind of felt like an octopus. I think that I kind of view myself more as I'm also a Pisces, so a conduit or a channeler or a connector for sure. I think I have an ability to kind of see people as their full selves, and then I'm kind of able to look at others and be like, oh, you kind of have this spark here, and you would connect with this other person in this way. And I think if you were both vulnerable, I mean, I don't say any of these things, but that you could really blossom together in this space if the container and the conditions and the ecosystem, it's right. And I think I try to do that in every aspect of my life, whether, when I started a new job, I kind of was talking to people one-on-one, which is kind of how I prefer to interact. And then I was like, oh, there's something about you that lights up when I say this. Mm-hmm. And when I talk to someone else, there's something that their light kind of dims when I say that. And maybe you both are kind of on this melodic frequency that if you're both in the same room, your tune, the sound of your song will be right. And I think that's kind of what came up on Designing Motherhood, that I didn't know that was a superpower that I had. I thought it was something that everybody just did or could do and maybe didn't want to do or didn't have the time to do. And then as the project went on and we all kind of created the advisory council, or we're interviewing people for the babies, which was a narrative portrait project that we worked on through Designing Motherhood, I kind of started to notice patterns in relationships, which is a very neurodivergent thing to say, but it is kind of how I view the world. So I think I brought a conduit, a channeler.
A carer. It was so important, Zoe, because all of the stories on this project were people's very personal stories. It was the project, and you were going to say, I'll keep it really short so you say what you're going to say, Juliana, but these were people's stories about losing children, about trying to have children, about not having children and caring in other ways for young and old people in their communities. And it was often in the context or connected to an art world which drops in and drops out, but doesn't always have continued conversations or continued connections with folks after they have participated in an exhibition or a book. And you kept that continuity through many, many different phases of the project. So I admire that so much about you.
I was just going to add that Zoe coordinated or facilitated and held our first advisory council, and I think that is where the glue, like the model for the way that we interact with our thought partners and our community partners and our advisors. To me, that was modeled by Zoe and the care that they took in facilitating this relationship, and that is like so core to our project. We don't operate, like we won't do it if you're not gonna like find advisors and like situate it in a place and pay them. And that is really modeled on the work that Zoe, which I think comes into the care that they were talking about. Just to give context to it.
Yeah. Can I talk about Zoe as well? Zoe, I love Zoe. Yeah, I know. March is like we have babies, but Zoe is like the youngest auntie so she's our baby. They are our baby. And I think a while ago, Zoe's Instagram name was Graceful Savagery. And I think that's also what Zoe is poetic. They have a way with words. They are picturesque in the way that they communicate. If you need a beautiful email sent, right here. But Zoe don't play that. And they're gonna call out any instances of injustice or inequities in the most poetic, graceful savagery type of way. Yeah, and Zoe helps you to pause in a very fast-paced world where there might be deadlines or, you just a robot getting things done, waking up, working, going to sleep. Zoe makes you pause and think and consider and care and all of the things, and yeah, you the shit. Yeah, for sure.
You kept us correct, You kept us correct for so much of it.
I love it. And so great work doesn't happen without people. Like you, Zoe. You know what I mean? Like I know it's uncomfortable, but it's like that's the gift back to you. You gifted it to the project. This is the gift back to recognize your superpowers. And we all have to find those superpowers as soon as you can, because then you hone them and develop them, and then you really kick ass. Right? So Michelle, I'm gonna actually ask you a question. Right? I love hearing all the things from Michelle. And this one's kind of more of a personal one. So you're here with March. Yep. And I just want to point this out, that it's a big deal. And I think I was talking to somebody in LA, Kaylee in LA, and I think Kaylee maybe has met you once. Twice. But Kaylee's response to March being here was coming from a deeply personal place. Because you have shared very publicly about your journey that has overlapped somewhat with a Designing Motherhood. It occurred during this Designing Motherhood experience. And I just want to point that out, that to me, from over here, they're very much intertwined. And for you, and for a lot of other people. And I say that because I point this out not to get up absolutely into all of our personal business, but I also think in my work, I did some, the work around the surgery that I did, and the artist talks that followed that, they were very personal. Probably the most personal I have been in public spaces. And the reason why I bring myself to do that is because I'm trying to take things that happen behind closed doors that fester for a lot of people and turn into negativity in our world, to bring them into public spaces so we can look at it, discuss it, feel it, build community, support each other through it, and hopefully have it personal impact. on the one-to-one basis, not the grand basis. And after that particular talk, people came up in tears and said, I have not been seen like this before. I have this 18-month-old, my body is a wreck. I didn't know, all of these conversations. And I think about your sharing of your journey to bring March here, and how it is, I'm gonna say, like, healing for some. It is seen for others, and it is just like heartfelt and personal. And I think that's an impact that you particularly are having in the context of designing motherhood, and would have it outside of it too. So I don't know what there was a question. I'm just gonna.
You answered it really beautifully, because you do it so wonderfully through your own work. I think a couple of things. People who know me, I'm a fairly open book, and so I don't keep a lot to myself, for better or for worse. I think also the thing that brought me to designing motherhood in the first place was political. I was raised by a single mother. I saw how hard parenting was for her, and I knew I wanted it to be different for me. So I wanted a job, and I wanted a job I could be financially stable in. And so as I started to think about having a kid, I was also starting out on a curatorial track, and there are not many curatorial jobs. And a person who I greatly admire, who was an amazing mentor to me, I asked her about her trajectory. And she had said, no plants, no pets, no children. And I really wanted to have kids. And I thought, and it wasn't, people raise an eyebrow sometimes with that. It was true, though. It was a really hostile environment for her, certainly, in that space. But I also realized I had great privilege. Curators in museums still, even when we're really trying to undo this, have a great power in those spaces. And when you can say something public, it changes things for other co-workers of yours. And so even when I was a junior curator, I knew I wanted to be public with this question that I had. How do you have a job where you can be financially independent and a kid because you want to have a family? And that was really, for me, the interest in designing motherhood. There was also grief, though. I came off birth control 11 years before I had my child. And so it was a long time to be quiet about it. And so at some point in time, I also grew up through my 30s. I experienced the death of my mom. I experienced the death by suicide of a friend. And there was a point where I just couldn't hide feeling sad anymore. And I didn't want to. Why would you? You come in from the weekend and you tell people you've been to the beach, you've gone to the farmer's market, you've gone on a trip somewhere, and also you're doing this thing after 7 rounds of IVF and many other attempts. It becomes a thing that you can't help but share. And in some ways that was really great too, because I get a little anxious about not showing up and doing all the work that I'm meant to. And so when I told my boss, I'm going through IVF, so sometimes I'll be late. I have to go in for a 7 a.m. blood test many times. So I might be in at 9:30 instead of 8:30. And you know what? He said, both of my children were IVF babies. I know exactly what you're doing. And that was amazing, because I had expected him to be great, okay, I see you're not really committed. And instead, it was this weight off my shoulders. And so I thought, okay, if I'm saying that out loud, maybe it allows somebody else to also say it out loud. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it allows them to have a conversation in another place of safety for them. The amount of messages, Alison, I've had over the years from people saying, I am also feeling like this. It's really nice to know that somebody else is also going through this. And then also, not just the emotional part, the practical part. Where did you go for this procedure? And I had to learn that one from the ground up a lot of the time. But then through the research that we've been privileged enough to have access to through this book, I've been able to say, oh, if you're interested in this, or if your problem is this, I've actually found this great provider. You might want to check out X or Y. And so it is a community in many different ways. Finally, I will say, there's two quotes that I used in the child-free chapter. One by Adrienne Rich and another by Ursula Le Guin, and they're beautiful quotes. And I'm going to butcher them. You can read them properly in that chapter. But Adrienne Rich talks in 1975 about it being so important to be truthful about our experiences as women, because then we know we're all not going insane when we share them. To say them out loud is to know that we have sanity and that we have solidarity. And then Ursula Le Guin has a much more poetic way of saying that when we speak our truths, new mountains are made. And I really love that too. You change the landscape of what is around you. And I don't think I'm changing landscapes, but I do think that these little moments together that we have in conversation
I know that a lot of people will say, oh, you know, you shouldn't talk about that thing in public. I'm British. Like, there's a lot you should not talk about in public when you are British. But I love ignoring that because I've only had good conversations when I've talked one-on-one, 3-to-1, sometimes in a group like this, and we've talked about, but also listened to the truth of other people's experiences. And so that's why being public about IVF, I couldn't hold it in after a while, and I do think there's a power. And I've learned actually from other amazing artists and folks in the room who have had similar experiences, not least you, Jennifer. So thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing that. I am appreciative of your sharing because it also normalizes the sharing. Like it normalizes it for all of us. And growing up Guyanese American, which is impacted by that British mentality.
I was about to say.
And I think it really fuels a lot of mental health crisis. Yeah. Because you are going insane for all folks, not just women, but it is not talked about in public spaces. So that's a very personal kind of note to end on the like official moderation, but I also want to take a moment, because I'm sure we're at time, to open up conversation if people have specific questions, and if any of the panelists want to add anything else to the dialogue, just take a moment. You're supposed to wait 8 seconds.
Yeah, I have a burning question.
Oh, yes.
So something that struck me while you were talking about the way the curatorial threads have been woven together over the course of the project was that there's this pretty essential restructuring of like kinship and like even just like the design lexicon for thinking about like genealogy and family structure. And you know, I think we were talking yesterday in the galleries about Jennifer's work being right next to Deb Willis's work and thinking about like genealogies of like artists and like skill sharing and intergenerational knowledge. And you know, in the Queer Birth Project, it's like there's chosen family and surrogate family and donor egg family, and like, you know, could you talk a little bit about the intersections between what's happening in some of the artworks and then like how that restructuring is happening maybe curatorially? I think there's like a connection there.
Well, I think so. Well, what's interesting? So I come from trained as an academic, which has like messed up my brain in a lot of ways. But there's also like academic lineages, like so and so was their advisor, and Amber mentioned that Amber, Michelle, and I all share a mentor in this person, and I do think you can see her imprint on some of the pieces of paper in the gallery. Like I learned to put pieces of paper in a gallery from Juliet Kinchin, but not just in the objects, but also in the care that one treats one's like chosen family with. When I worked with Juliet, she was the first curator at MoMA to give a curatorial assistant authorial credit on the catalog she was working with. Like that didn't happen there in, I don't even remember how many years ago. So there are like lessons that are modeled almost in kind of kin in the way that we treat each other and we treat the artists we work with and we treat the objects that I feel like have been passed down. I mean, it was that feels like something to me of like a kin of, in the same way that your parents or the people around you model a way of behaving. Like I feel like there's a mode of operating that was modeled to me that I also hope to model in a lot of ways in interacting with artists and objects and my collaborators. I do feel like collaboration is probably the kin word that kind of ties through all of this and really does tie through all of those elements. Yeah.
I didn't grasp the question at first. I'm like, damn, that's deep. I'm not sure, but then now as I think about it, I think about my origin story to Designing Motherhood. My son is in the book. Me and my baby, and my mom took the picture.
All of us are in the book.
Yes, we're all in the book. And just, you know, this world is a new world for me being in. So me thinking there's no lineage for me here. Like I'm the one starting this lineage, and I think that's exciting. There's a lot of responsibility behind that. But one of the conversations that we've been having over the past couple of days is just like, what else is for me? And so me starting this lineage of having our family in books, multiple books at this point, how? I could have never, like I would have never thought. Multiple books. My son has been in exhibitions. He's normally with me at these things as well. I left him home because I thought Houston was going to be lit. Y'all. It was cold. It wasn't what I thought. Houston is awesome. But just thinking about how I can create that lineage moving forward is, thank you for that question, because now I'm actively going to be thinking about what that looks like. What does that legacy look like for myself, my family? What does it look like exposing other people? My mom is, she doesn't even have really good vision, and she's credited as a photographer in the book. Like, I don't even know if she saw what she did. And just to expose her to that, like, you're also in the book and a part of this work and has traveled with us as well. So thank you for that question.
I'm just going to tweak what I said also. I feel like I have modeled a lot of good things that have been kind of passed down in some institutional settings, but I feel like if I've learned anything from this group, it's also like we don't have to model bad things. We don't have to keep those cycles going, and it's breaking a lot of the bad cycles to create these own lineages that I feel feels really important about the way that we've.
And sometimes that happens easier outside of an institution, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add, so my friend and I are both midwives here in Houston, and you mentioned city planning, and I just wanted to say, actually, through education, like through this book or people that you've referenced, I got more familiar with the idea of reproductive justice. And at one point, our labor delivery unit was threatened to be shut down. And using that lens of reproductive justice, I looked at basically a city planning perspective, right? Because we would notice more people coming to our ER when the bus came. Because we were in a public hospital, so we were serving a lot of like lower income women, lower income working people. And so I was in a class at Rutgers at the time, and basically, like, New Jersey, was able to look at, hey, what is the bus route for Houston? You know, it's a spaghetti bowl, there's freeways everywhere. If you shut down this hospital, how is that going to impact these neighborhoods in North Houston? And it would have taken basically like a 10-minute bus trip and turned it into a 2-hour bus trip to be able to get to your prenatals, your ER, blah, 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 blah. And so, you know, that our CEO was rounding kind of like, hey, what's the issues, da 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 da. And like, because of having the lens of like, oh no, this isn't just like, this isn't profitable, we need to move these nurses. This is actually structural violence to remove access to care in this way. Like, to me, part of why birth work and motherhood is so interesting is the outcomes in birth work become a microcosm of literally every single structural form. And so you look at why are maternal mortalities like rates so different, because it's literally embodied violence and embodied like, you know, structural impacts. And so to like open up the vocabulary through this lens of like objects that impact us every single day, like, yeah, it opens the doors to these conversations that can actually have like physical impacts on bodies. So thank you so much.
Wow.
Hi, thank you. This is such a pleasure of a project. I work with Michelle, and actually she, as a curatorial assistant, and Juliet were the first people to give me a credit as a conservator on a show. And so that it passes along. But it was really beautiful to see. I now live in Houston, and having the show come here. And I don't know if it was talked about, but the night of the opening was the day after the election. And it was incredible to be here that night because it was so sad. And it was really helpful to be here for the opening because you saw so much happening, in the whole election in Texas especially was about reproductive rights. And so thinking that went down, and it was so powerful to see all these objects here that are all mostly illegal or will be illegal soon, and to see that there's a light out, you know, like I moved here from New York, right? So like we know that there's a lot of difference in how your freedom in those two different places. And this was like such a light on that day. So I just want to say the impact in Texas the day after the election to have this open here was enormous, you know, and it was a really nice public space of grieving.
I thank you all for the stories, but I would also like to hear from Sarah, what it felt like for you to, right, kind of inherit in some ways, build on this project and bring it to life here. Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you. Well, I wrote to Michelle and Juliana like pretty immediately. I think like maybe 15 minutes after I left a Planned Parenthood talk. And they were talking about just like the scale of our state, where we are, and how every time a piece of legislation is passed, they have a whole team that just is tracking the legislation, and every single change that happens, there's just like a unit of people who's are shape-shifting to facilitate care after each thing happens. I was thinking about Juliana, who is a friend of mine from other projects and other curatorial spaces, and Juliana mentioned thinking about infrastructures and spaces and like architecture and highways and all of these things as also as part of the design of care. And after that talk, they said most people, it takes them like 9 hours to get out of this state, if not more. And so how does that impact, like, you know, just the infrastructure then goes to like, it expands immensely to be able to access care. So I wrote them an email right after that, and I was like, I saw the show in Philadelphia. The Mutter Museum was my first curatorial job ever. And I was like, I really think it would be so meaningful to have it in Texas. But I felt a huge weight. I was so nervous for all of you to come because I was like, this is their baby. I'm so, you know, it's like, yeah, enacting it was an immense pleasure. So
it's like when your child meets like the best girlfriend or boyfriend of their dreams, and you're like, you guys go do you now. Like, yeah, no. It's like it's a labor of love. Like it really is like it's a love thing. It is.
Yeah. I just want to go back to the comment about the show opening the week of the election. Originally, we knew, you know, Sarah was very intentional, I think, knowing that this show was going to be here in the fall of this presidential election. And actually the Craft Center was closed for several months because of storm damage following Hurricane Beryl. So the fact that it opened the week of the election was kind of an accident, but a planned accident eventually. I don't know, I'm not saying that correctly, but I again want to go back to congratulate the staff and the dedication of the staff and the board in getting behind hosting this at this time. We were a bit nervous. You know, we were preparing for what kind of response we might get. But in general, like what was just said, anyone who has come in has been very grateful. And it's kind of changed the mood of the Craft Center. It's been a very reflective space, a place of pride, and I want to thank the team, again, the curatorial team, for creating this opportunity for us to have this here and to host this safe space that we've been talking about for a couple of days now. Thank you.
And just the biggest appreciation to all of our exhibiting artists who are here. Thank you, Jennifer, for Tessa, and also those presentations were fascinating.
Find all of our videos and sign up for our newsletter at artthisweek.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter.